In this lesson, we're going to learn about the versions of HTML and the doc types. Let's look at HTML. Now, before you fall asleep, don't worry, it's going to be a quick one, and you're going to see why it makes sense to understand the history of HTML. Well, we're just going to learn a little bit. So, HTML was first invented in 1991 and by a guy named Tim Berners-Lee. And you can see how it progressed. There's HTML, and there's HTML 2.0, HTML 3.2, HTML 4.01. So Xhtml, what's that? Xhtml is actually another computer language. It's based on another computer language called XML. And it was made to look like and work like HTML. And it was very popular for many years. But now, like all the previous versions of HTML, Xhtml is no longer the language that you want to use to build web pages. Today, going forward, HTML5 in 2014 became pretty solid, and it's the standard, and it's the language you want to use to build your websites. I mention all these versions of HTML because of the doc types. You see, as you remember when we did our basic web page, you notice we had this doc type at the top of the page. And what the doc type does is it tells the web browser which version of HTML that we're going to be coding in our pages. These days, we want to use the HTML5 doc type, which is this one here. But sometimes when you look at older sites you may come across, or you may have to edit them, who knows? You may run across some older doc types where the websites are using older versions of HTML or maybe Xhtml. Look at these doc types. Now, the latest and greatest version, HTML5, the one you're going to be using, looks like this. Nice and simple. Now, the old ones, look at HTML 4.01. Look at how big this one was. Look at Xhtml, even bigger. So what happened is that the nerds in charge of HTML and so on, they said, you know what, let's make HTML simple. So HTML5 was designed to not only be much more powerful than HTML 4.01 or Xhtml, it's not only much more powerful, it's actually a lot easier and a lot quicker to write. And one example is the doc type. Look how much simpler it is versus these down here. Sometimes when surfing the web, or maybe you might do a web project for a friend or somebody in your family, who knows, you may run across a site that has an older version of HTML. So let's take a look at Studio Web, for instance. Right click, view page source. And if you can look here, you see that Studio Web is a new site and it has the latest version of HTML. We know that because we see the HTML5 doc type right at the top of the page where it should always be. Let's compare that to one of my older sites, killersites.com. This site was first built in 1996, so it's pretty old, and it was updated over the years, but it needs some updating still. So if you look at this code, you notice that Killer Sites uses an older doc type. It uses the HTML 4.01 doc type. Just want to mention this so you know that there are still sites out there that use the older doc types. You may run across them, and I just wanted you to know, what they look like, and I wanted you to understand that there were different versions of HTML over the years. But nowadays, we're lucky enough to have HTML5, which is the latest and greatest. It's simpler, it's more powerful. It's a great version of HTML to learn and use.